People who were in a coma. What change surprised you when you woke up? I was in a coma for close to 6 weeks. When I woke, I had to learn everything again. I had most of my speech abilities, but my motor control was horrid. I had to figure out how to wipe my ass as well as walk up and down stairs again. That took about 3 weeks. I had lost a shit ton of weight too. I was 6 feet 3 inches and weighed about 145. 6 weeks? Holy God! My nephew, 14, was in a medically induced coma for over 3 months. During that time, he had lost about 30% of his body weight as his muscles atrophied. His first remark upon seeing himself for the first time was, "Did you forget to feed me?" Which was incredibly hard to hear, since his family had sat crying at his bedside every moment he was unconscious. I gotta give your nephew points. He chose some good words for his reentry. If it ever happens to me, I'm gonna try to remember to say 5 more minutes. Had bacterial meningitis when I was 2 years old and lost my sense of smell. Too young to remember. Wasn't aware anything was missing until I was about 10 years old though. My mom had a rose garden and LDC everyone putting their noses in the flowers. Obviously now I know why. And I just assumed they liked the feel of the petals tickling their noses. In my late 30s now, and I still do this with roses every chance I get. A good friend of our family went into a coma for half a year. Finally, when he woke up, he was stunned why his wife looked so old. He actually lost the last 15 years of his memory. He knew he had 2 children, but they were babies, and he didn't even know about his 3rd child. And the memory never came back. He skipped from no mobile phones to smartphones to laptops. Everything was new to him. Being stuck in early 90s, but actually being in the 2000s, there was a lot of change to handle. But learning you missed all your children growing up was the hardest for him. At least he knew who his wife was. If they had met after his memory line, he wouldn't know anything about her. I knew a guy who lost the last 2 years of his memory, including his wife and baby, after getting blown up in Iraq. To him, he fell asleep in the early weeks of basic training for the army and woke up on the streets of Iraq with gunfire and strangers dragging him to cover. Luckily, one guy in our platoon went to basic with him and was able to calm him down. Separated from the military, and his life has never been the same. He is still largely functional, but can have pretty bad mood swings and headaches at times. His wife is a saint though. She basically pulled out all the stops and got super romantic with him to make him fall in love again. She contacted various guys in the unit a lot for different ideas because she was terrified he would fall in love with someone else and leave. It was sweet, and I'm only a little jealous that she basically had to go full-on rom-com to keep him. I want to know more about this, but I don't know what to ask. Tell her to write a book about it, or something. Sort of the opposite tale. A co-worker of mine got into a nasty car crash. When he woke up, he had lost the last few years of memory. But in those years, his marriage had fallen apart along with a lot of unhappy life stuff. So he still thought he was in love with his new wife, and she basically wanted nothing to do with him. Holy shit. Can you imagine waking up in basic to gunfire and thinking, damn, that's some impressive field exercise, only to realize you're actually in Iraq. About 20 years ago, my cousin had a severe head injury from a fall. He was about 20 at the time, but was in a coma for almost 4 weeks. When he woke up, he fairly quickly discovered that his memory was eidetic. He could repeat entire conversations back word for word, and even tell you the date and time you said something. Also, he could memorize images with just a few seconds glance. His memory is still eidetic today. It's annoying as fuck. Whenever he reminds me of something I said in the past, usually something I can't even remember, I suggest that we hit him in the head again. Looking at what happened last time he was hit in the head, he'd probably just develop another borderline superpower. Better not risk getting corrected or called out even more accurately. I've read an interview with a person that also has eidetic memory. They stated it can be quite a burden because uncomfortable or sad memories stay strong as well. How does your cousin deal with this? Does he find it manageable? Imagine remembering every cringy thing you ever said in startlingly clear 4K. Or remembering word for word everything a person says to you. Try dating a person and never forgetting every negative thing. And it's proven humans already remember negative more strongly than positive. My memory isn't that perfect, but it's kind of awful a lot of the time. Can you recall how he hit his head? Not that I want to repeat the fall and try to get that superpower. I think something fell on his head in his workplace, which caused him to fall and hit his head again on the way down. But there were no immediate witnesses. Someone found him crumpled up on the floor and called an ambulance. He has no recollection of the event. Must have been a radioactive meteorite. Bonk on the head, instant superpowers. Well, not very fucking eidetic then, is he? Medically induced for approximately a week due to sepsis. When I was in, I thought I was a bird with my wings outstretched that was slowly freezing to the ground. When I woke up, I thought I was in Taos, but it looked like Raton. I was in Albuquerque in a hospital that I had worked in for years. I thought I was 10 years younger. I thought I had gotten into a wreck and my fiancé at the time was an abusive ex-boyfriend. I thought my fiancé had found me naked on the side of 1 to 25 and had taken to a veterinary hospital. It took another month and a half for me to understand what happened. I was in and out of surgery and died a couple times in that time. Once, they were changing plus my wound vac, and I looked down ANCV saw inside of me. Then things started making a little more sense. I still can't eat cheeseburgers. Back in the 90s, my great-grandfather had a stroke. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and when he woke up, he could not speak English. All he could speak was the Choctaw language. He had learned it when he was a kid because his family lived right near a Choctaw reserve, and he played with a lot of those kids. He spoke it fluently at that time, but forgot it over his life to where he couldn't remember any of it by this time. This went on for around 10 days. And then he woke up from a night's sleep and could suddenly speak only English again, not remembering a word of Choctaw. He was also able to repeat verbatim every conversation that had been held in the room that he was in. I was in a coma for 9 days. Probably most surprised by how I had to relearn how to pee and swallow. Also, not a change, but I was surprised that if I had never woke up, I'd have just never known, if that makes sense. No light, no dreams. Just a big nothing that I'd never be aware of if I hadn't woke up. Don't know what I was expecting. I'm not particularly religious or anything, it's just weird. Oh hey, I finally got to one of these fairly quickly. I was in a short coma, 3 months, but the time really messed me up since it crossed the new year. It felt so much longer. I was also really groggy and had surgery on a leg and totally thou. Via was amputated, so my first response was to freak out and start ripping everything out. Do not do this. DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, sent me into a coma. I have vague memories of being sick beforehand, but my overall sense of time was just mush. Even years later, I can't establish a correct timeline. I have flashes of memories of different doctors coming in and out of the room. Once I was out of the coma, I was still pretty out of it. When you're on an insulin drip, they check your sugar every hour. I could never actually sleep, but I fell asleep the whole time. It's a hard feeling to describe, just mushy runny time. Edit. My boyfriend and non-Redditor saw me replying to various comments and asked why I was engaging with trolls. I read some of the comments. He and I are both totally impressed with how much support from random strangers exists out there. You guys are all awesome for realizing that this life isn't exactly easy. We've all thought about punching someone when they say either H, that's what my grandma has and she's FV. At least it's not cancer. Or the absolute worst. Are you allowed to eat that? Thank you all. You're amazing. I went into surgery to get my appendix out. Note, I was on an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf in 2004. I didn't know it at the time, but I have malignant hyperthermia, which pretty much means I die if I get anesthesia. Long story short, I woke up 4 days later and I thought, why are my calves sore? Anesthesiologist here. Oh shit. When my mom came out of her coma, car accident trauma plus medical induction, she acted like a child and basically grew up again over the course of the first 2 days. It was freaky. We had to keep reminding her who she was, where she was, and what happened to her. Also, she refused to believe her legs were broken. She had internal fixtures not cast, so she kept trying to get out of bed. It took her about 2 weeks to fully be aware and functioning again, but her personality was forever altered by the trauma to her brain. I was in and out of a coma state for 4 days after an overdose. I remember swimming in an ocean, vividly. I remember drowning. I remember waking back up in the ocean and swimming again. When I finally came coherently, till I couldn't hear properly and didn't want to eat at all for a few days. I also felt like I just woke up from a surgery. I was extremely peppy and felt like I was swimming while moving. I felt cold and clammy too. Could have just been a side effect of the pills, though. Not me, but my father was in an accident as a child. He was riding his bike and was hit by a car. He spent 2 months in a coma. By the time he woke up, my grandmother's hair had gone completely white. She was 38. It's weird what stress can do to someone. I was in the hospital as an infant for a few weeks, and my father was so stressed out about me that most of his hair fell out in chunks. Went from looking similar to young Tesla to Homer Simpson, no offense to my father.